Welcome back to the Presence Podcast. I am so thrilled to have Spencer Rascoff with me today, who is one of the most successful entrepreneurs of our time, having co-founded Zillow, Picasso, and Hotwire. Spencer is also an investor, a podcast host, a Harvard educator, and he frequently appears on national TV to speak about industry trends and the future of real estate. In this conversation, Spencer shares his thoughts on the NAR settlement, what it means for agents and for consumers, how AI will impact real estate agents, and some of his uncommon beliefs about real estate. We also talk about the most innovative companies he's invested in, including his investment in Luxury Presence. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Spencer, thank you so much for being on. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So I would love to start this conversation with your upbringing. Your grandfather and parents were all entrepreneurs. And I'm curious, how did their experiences shape your perspective on risk-taking and starting companies?
Yeah, it's a good question, Malte. I think people tend to overstate and over-worry about this whole risk thing. And they use it as an excuse to hide behind to avoid entrepreneurship. So my grandfather was a successful entrepreneur. He started a couple different businesses. The one that was most successful was a men's suit business, a haberdashery, you might call it, in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, which he eventually sold and had what we would call today a successful exit. And my father, his son-in-law, also was a successful entrepreneur. And he was in the music industry. So he started off as an accountant and then broke off and sort of really started and created a really successful career as a music tour producer and business manager for rock groups, for U2, the Rolling Stones, David Bowie, Pink Floyd, Paul Simon, Elvis Presley, and many others. And I watched my dad build his entrepreneurial career through a lot of different changes in the music industry as it shifted, first in terms of musical format, from records to cassettes to 8-tracks, I guess from records to 8-tracks to cassettes to CDs to streaming, and then how the concert industry changed and became so much more industrialized at scale. And I watched him reinvent his business model and his company's business model through several different iterations as technology shifted around him in his industry. Those were both formative experiences for me, helped encourage me to become more of an entrepreneur and help me calibrate what risk-taking really means.
Yeah. And now you're paying it forward. You recently started a company with your daughter. Can you tell us more about the company and why you decided to start a business with your daughter?
Sure. Yeah. Sophia and I started a company called Recon Food, which is to reconnect over food. We started it during COVID when people were on quarantine and everyone was very lonely. And social media was really an inhospitable place at the time. It still is. But when we all needed connection more than ever, we found that social media was really divisive. But food is something that people connect over. And that's that is the quintessential form of connectivity. And so what Recon Food is, it's a vertical social network just for food. So think like Instagram for food. And my hypothesis is that there are some categories that are significant enough, are big enough, are important enough that they deserve their own vertical social network. So in fitness, for example, you have Fitbit and Strava and Peloton and a couple other vertical social networks just for fitness. In careers and job growth and career management, you have LinkedIn, where you're going to post certain things on LinkedIn that you wouldn't post on Instagram. And there may be a couple other categories like that, I believe, and hope that food will be one of those. And so building that company with my daughter was a really fun, exciting, and also challenging and stressful experience, as sometimes working with family is. We built a great app on iPhone and Android, which has a small but very dedicated user base that love posting pictures of food that they eat and food that they cook, and connecting with friends and family over food in a dedicated social network just for food, separate from Instagram or other horizontal social media.
Yeah. And it sounds like you had a thesis going in of something you believe to be true about what's going to exist in the future. Is that something that you were always good at and able to do when you go back to early days of starting Hotwire, starting Zillow? Was that part of your thinking back then?
Most of the startups that I've been involved in have tried to democratize access to something that a small subset of people have access to. So I don't want to overstate. I don't read a crystal ball. I'm not some genius futurist that's able to predict that, someday in the future, people will do X or Y. What I am pretty good at, though, is noticing that there are certain things that a small subset of people who have access to something love. So in the case of Hotwire, my first startup, it was obvious that people love having access to travel deals, and they were generally pretty inaccessible. And we innovated on a way to provide great travel discounts to people, to everybody. And the innovation there was to hide certain aspects of the purchase until afterwards. So you don't know the name of the hotel, you don't know the airline. And that allowed us to democratize access to these great deals, make them available to anybody with those certain trade-offs. In the case of Zillow, it was pretty obvious that people, industry experts like you or me, Malte, that with access to the MLS, with access to county data, with access to proprietary data sources and off-market information, we had information that others would probably like. And so we democratized access to that and created Zillow. In the case of Picasso, my newish startup, it's obvious that people love to own a second home, but it's also obvious that it's generally prohibitively expensive for people to own a second home. And so we're trying to democratize access to second home ownership through co-ownership. So I think that's what I'm good at, is noticing things that some subsegment of people, usually rich people, are able to access and love, and trying to democratize that so more people can experience it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And often when something is obvious, it's obvious to everyone. And the key is to find something that is obvious to a small number of people and will be obvious to everyone in the future. How do you find these contrarian ideas that are obviously just a few?
Look, I keep a list. I keep a startup idea list. I always have. It's got, 100 things on it. Some really dumb things that are not worthy of starting companies. And then some other problems that I've always noticed about the world, which should probably have companies to solve them. So when I left Zillow 5 years ago, I turned my attention to that list because for the first time in 15 years, I had time to actually think about other startups. One of the oldest ideas on that list, and the thing that I experienced constantly, was that it was difficult to figure out what to watch on TV, that streaming had become so fragmented, and something would be on Peacock and something would be on Hulu and something would be on Netflix, and you couldn't figure out what was where, keep track of it. And so that was on the list. And I set out to tackle that idea, and I recruited a team out of Snapchat. We built a company called Q, which I know you know. We raised venture capital for it. And today we have millions of downloads, and it's a great way to figure out what to watch based on what your friends are watching. In a lot of ways, it's a vertical social network. So anyway, so to answer your question, I guess the answer is I have lots of ideas, and some of them work and some of them don't and some of them won't. But I'm a list keeper about most things, including ideas.
Yeah, it's one of the things I find so fascinating and impressive about your background. You are clearly very good at the idea stage and the 0 to 1 stage, right? You've done it multiple times, and there are not many people that get to product market fit even once, and you've done it time and time again. And then you're also very competent at the 1 to 100 scaling and execution stage. Mm-hmm. And I don't know many people that can do both. So I guess this is me saying your background is incredibly impressive to me, but I am curious, what do you enjoy more, and what do you think it takes to be successful at each of the two very different stages?
It's a very insightful question. They are very different. And I spend most of my days nowadays mentoring and coaching early stage startups, either that I've invested in or that I've incubated or just that I'm an advisor to. And the skill set required to be good at that stage is about grit and determination and attention to detail and agility and moving quickly and responding to customer feedback and also penny pinching, really managing to burn and runway. And I'm pretty good at that. I like that stage, but I will tell you that I do miss operating at scale. When I was running Zillow, we had 4,000 employees. We had a $20 billion market cap. We had a couple $1 billion of cash. And what I loved about executing at that stage was when we had an idea that we were excited about, it's like we're playing poker at the big boy table with a big stack. And if you play poker, you know that if you have a big stack of chips, it's a huge advantage because you can bully the other players at the table. And we were able to do that at Zillow, meaning that if we saw a good idea and I wanted to increase the size of the bet, I would say, hey, let's just throw 20 people at that. Or, hey, let's put $10 million towards that. Or let's go buy that company for a couple $100 million. And playing at that scale is fun and very different than being at the very early stage. So each have their pros and cons. I think the negative of that late stage is the people issues are massive. By the end of my 15 years at Zillow with 4,000 employees, I was spending a significant amount of time just managing people. And if you're an engaged CEO at that scale, you're basically a CHR. You're spending all day recruiting, retaining, motivating, managing through HR issues. And you're pretty far away from the products. You're pretty far away from the 0 to 1 stage. And so that's the negative of managing at scale. So there are pros and cons of it being at each stage.
Yeah. You've hired and worked with some of the best leaders in the world. What are some of the commonalities in terms of their traits that you found allowed them to be effective?
One underappreciated trait of successful people at all stages is their salesmanship, sales ability. And I think we over lionize technical ability at startups and among startup founders, and we underappreciate sales ability and charisma, because at a startup, you're always selling. You're selling the company to investors, your current investors to keep them engaged, to future investors. You're selling it to candidates. You're selling it to your own employees. You're selling it to business partners and customers. You're selling it sometimes to your spouse, who's saying to you, hey, why don't you go get a real job that pays more? Like, why are you working at this company that seems to always be on the edge of death? And you're trying to convince yourself and your spouse and your parents why this is the right thing. And so sales ability and the charisma that is closely connected with that is really important. It's something that Austin Allison, my co-founder at Picasso, has in spades. It's something that Rich Barton, my co-founder at Zillow, is excellent at. And it's something that a lot of technical teams under index on. So that's one to really think about. I think great founders and great teams usually have a mission orientation, and they're able to communicate it to employees to inspire their teams. And so finding a way to connect your business to some higher goal is really important. And you want your employees, whether they're in marketing and they're writing email copy, or they're in customer support and they're responding to customer inquiries, or they're software engineers and they're writing code, you want them to feel like their work levels up to something more important and bigger than just them. And great leaders, great founders do that very well. So those are two potentially non-obvious things that I've always common threads I've seen in successful founders and successful people.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. You invest in a lot of startups out of 75 and Sunny. How many investments have you made to date? And maybe share 3 companies that you're excited about that you think will do big things in the next 3 or 5 years.
I think I've invested in about 75 companies. There are probably about 50 that are active, and there are 5 that I'm founder and chair of, and where I get much more involved. So let's see. I'm not prepared for that question. So let me just think for a second. Of course, other than Luxury Presence, which I'm a proud investor in and think is an amazing company.
I was going to ask you about that next.
But okay, all right. So we'll come back to that.
That's a great answer.
We'll come back to that. I won't use one of my 3 for Luxury Presence. Then I'll choose, let's see, 1 prop tech and 2 non-prop tech. I'll put aside Picasso since I'm founder and chair of that. And I think that's cheating to talk about your own company and answer this question. Arrived Homes is a Seattle-based prop tech company that's doing very well, that I'm a proud investor in. And I love their mission. They're trying to democratize access to real estate investing. So if you want to have more exposure to real estate, it's generally a pretty big ticket item, especially if you're going to do it as an investor. You're going to have to buy an apartment building or a single family home or a commercial development for hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. Arrive makes it as easy as buying a cup of coffee. So you go to their website, you can see a portfolio of companies, of houses to buy or projects to buy into, and you can buy with your credit card a couple $100 worth of any real estate investment. So that's a company where the mission really resonates with me, and the company's doing very well. A non-prop tech one, I already mentioned Q that I'm very excited about. Lets you figure out what to watch, but again, that's cheating because that was my company. Another one would be Invisible Universe, which is an LA-based company that is creating characters on social media. So think if you were starting the Walt Disney Company today, you wouldn't start with comic books, which is where all Mickey Mouse and his friends began. And if you were starting Pixar today, you wouldn't start with film. Instead, you would start with social media. So what Invisible Universe is doing is it's creating a cast of characters on Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok and other social media platforms. And as those characters gain millions and millions of followers and you follow their storylines through social media, they're then taking that intellectual property and porting it over to TV shows, film, books, toys, etc. So I love that idea. And of course, they're using AI to create a lot of these characters as well. So there's an important AI angle to that business. So that's a very cool company based here in LA, raised a bunch of venture capital that I'm a big fan of. And I guess if I could quote one more, a third one, but let's see. I don't know. There's another one here in LA called Wave XR, which is also in the media and entertainment industry. They create or they power virtual concerts of avatars in the metaverse. So an act like Justin Bieber or John Legend will go to their studio in Culver City, put on a green suit and perform a concert. And then millions of fans will watch that concert and their avatars will be experiencing that concert in the metaverse, either inside of Roblox or inside of some other platform or on Wave's platform or on Meta's platform itself. And it's an incredible way to democratize access to musical concerts through the metaverse. And it's a very cool company as well.
Very cool. All really interesting ideas. You mentioned luxury presence. I've been fortunate to have you as an investor and advisor and real thought partner over the last couple of years. Why did you decide to invest in luxury presence? And what are you excited about looking ahead at the next few years?
At first glance at the time, luxury presence looked like a website company that provided IDX powered MLS sourced websites to real estate agents, which I thought was a bit of a yawner. Good idea. Every agent needs a great website. I don't know. I wasn't inspired by that mission. What I realized as I got to know the company better is a couple things. Number one, websites are the tip of the spear. In fact, the company has built a whole suite of services to power the best real estate agents and teams and sometimes brokerages as well. Number two, it's building a community of the best agents that share an interest in productivity, in entrepreneurship, in connecting, in sharing customers, but also just learning from each other and being inspired by each other. And many of my companies have a community aspect to them. I'm a community builder here in LA Tech. And so that part of Luxury Presence mission really connected with me as well.
That's great. And I've firsthand experienced the benefits of working with you. You're a straight shooter. You give a lot of very direct advice. I'm curious, what's the advice that you most commonly give to founders that they do not want to do?
The short version is don't always believe your own BS. The longer version is being a great founder is about being able to modulate between the incredible optimism that you need to believe that this is going to work, that I can run through walls, this company has superpowers, we're going to defy gravity, with the realism of understanding, oh my God, I only have this much money in the bank. We're losing this much money each month. That means our runway is only X more months. What am I going to do? And the sort of inherently bipolar nature of that existence, first of all, creates a lot of founder stress, but being able to dial up and dial down the duality of that existence is the superpower that great founders need. And sometimes great founders err on the side of positivity and they're unable to experience the realism that's necessarily required for success. So that's the feedback that I feel is sometimes ignored.
Yeah, that's great advice and definitely a tough line to toe the right way. Going from one meeting where you're pitching investors on why
That's
this
right.
is going to be a $5 billion company to your next meeting with your CFO talking about how much or how little runway you might have. Yeah, that's always a tricky one. You teach at Harvard, your alma mater. What's the most important lesson you try to impart on your Harvard students when you teach there?
The most important lesson is there is life outside of investment banking. Because at a school like Harvard, or really any top school, there is this like siren song to Wall Street, which is a very powerful magnet. And I have nothing against Wall Street. Wall Street is great. I started my career on Wall Street, but for a lot of people, it is not where they should end up, where they ought to end up. And my goal in teaching an undergraduate entrepreneurship course is just to try to expose them to other career paths and let them understand that there is a whole world out there of startups, of entrepreneurship, of venture capital that might inspire them to try to do something different besides just going to Wall Street.
Yeah, I know a lot of my B school friends are living that constant struggle back into consulting or finance.
Right.
It's a strong one. Yeah.
And again, like, it's fine for some people, and I'm not going to throw shade at it. The shade I will throw is the people that just end up doing it and they sleepwalk through life and they wake up at age 30 or 40 and they're rich, but unhappy and unmotivated professionally. And I've seen too much of that.
Okay, let's talk about real estate. The settlement has been in the news lately. Everyone's talking about it. Mm-hmm. What do you think it means for our industry? And what are some misconceptions that consumers have about what the settlement means?
Yeah, I haven't talked very much publicly about this. Let me think about how to organize my thoughts here. I've thought a lot about it. I've talked about it a lot privately. I don't think nearly as much is going to change about the industry as the mainstream media has reported. The mainstream media shouting from the rooftops, oh, commissions are going to come down, and NAR agreed to lower commissions and goodbye to 6%. That is not what the settlement actually says or what the settlement calls for. As all the settlement does is two things. Number one, it prohibits listing agents from putting in the MLS how much of their commission they'll share with the buyer's agent, while explicitly allowing cooperative compensation to continue. And number two, it requires buyer's agents to have buyers sign a buyer showing agreement. And that's it. So what I think is going to happen from all of this is not much. It's that listing agents are still going to share half their commission with buyer's agents. Commissions are going to come down a little bit. Why do I say that? Because there's been so much media attention about this that clients are going to seek a lower commission in those conversations with seller's agents and buyer's agents. And some of them will get it a little bit. So right now we're at 5.2% commission, not 6%, shared two ways, 2.6, 2.6. I would guess that comes down to 4.8 or 4.9, down from 5.2%. So that's about a 10-ish% reduction in one's commission, but it still gets shared on both sides. That's not that big a change. In fact, there was already momentum in that direction as home prices have gone up. Let me just give you the numbers real quick. So when we started Zillow almost 20 years ago, we started Zillow about 20 years ago, commissions were about 6% and commissions were $60 billion a year. Today, commissions are 5.2%, but $100 billion a year. So commission dollars have gone up from 60 billion to 100 billion because home values have gone from about 200,000 to about 400,000. Commission dollars are a lot higher than they ever have been because home values have appreciated. So anyway, I don't think that much is going to change is the short version. And I know that's a narrative violation, but that's my take. The one wild card is if the DOJ should come in at the 11th hour, because we know there's still a DOJ investigation underway, separate from the lawsuits. And if they prohibit cooperative compensation, then all bets are off. Then I think we see massive radical industry change. But I don't expect that. Nobody seems to really expect that. Most knowledgeable people seem to think that the settlement was run by the DOJ and that the cooperative compensation is going to continue. So not much change.
Yeah. Do you think it was a good thing for consumers or will be a good thing for consumers?
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's kind of a shoulder shrug for consumers. The fact that their commission is going to come down a little bit because they try to negotiate a little bit harder against their agent, maybe that's slightly beneficial to the consumer. Although most consumers, I think, just don't like having to do that anyway. So I'm not sure that's a huge, I'm not sure anybody's dancing in the streets about that. I don't think I don't think much is changing in the industry, and therefore I don't think it's much of a win or loss for the consumer. It was a big win for the plaintiff's attorneys, but I don't think it was a huge change for consumers, good or bad.
Yeah. How do you think this impacts real estate agents? Obviously, there are the two process changes that you mentioned. Who are going to be the winners and the losers when we look back at this in 3 years?
I think the continued consolidation at the top among agents will continue. This is a trend that has been happening for 10 or more years as the growth of the agent team, the growth of more software, productivity tools, the increasing sophistication of the best agents on social media and lead generation tactics and lead qualification tactics. More and more of the top agents are using software to scrub leads, to follow up, to incubate customers. So I think the losers are going to be the agents that do 0 to 1 deals a year. They're going to continue to leave the industry, and more transaction share will get consolidated among the best team agents. Those are luxury presence customers, of course. And that trend will just continue. And the NAR change probably accelerates that somewhat because, again, if you're an agent that does 2 deals a year and you are sleepwalking your way through 6% or 3% one side, easy squeezy, no problem, those days are not going to be it's going to get a little bit harder for you because you're probably not going to be able to get 3% with no effort. You're probably going to be fighting for 2.5%. And at some point, you're probably going to say to yourself, maybe this part-time real estate agent thing isn't for me. Maybe I should go back to teaching or selling some other product or doing whatever else I was doing.
Yeah, it sounds like what you're predicting is perhaps fewer agents in total doing more transactions on average at slightly lower profitability on a per unit basis, turning to technology to protect those profit margins by being able to serve more customers at the same time, more efficiently in better ways. And perhaps a renewed focus on the bottom line versus just the top line for agents. And
that was a very succinct and very insightful and accurate description of what I believe to be true. Yes, but
which of course aligns with a lot of what we're building towards with Luxury Presence and this belief that technology is an enabler for this industry. And we're getting to this point now. It really feels like a tipping point where agents and the industry as a whole has realized that you need great technology to provide a great experience, and you need to provide a great experience to provide the value that is necessary to earn your commission. I am personally quite optimistic about how we can empower agents throughout this. What can agents do to future-proof their business? So knowing that these process changes are happening, what do you think is most important for agents to focus on?
Just before I answer that, if you think about like how real estate or how technology permeates any industry, real estate has been pretty slow to adopt technology because it's such a fragmented industry where so much of the purchasing is made by individual independent contractors. So just compare it with, I don't know, the travel industry, where you've got just a couple of huge airlines and a couple of huge hotel companies. You've got a couple of huge online travel agencies, and then a couple of tech companies that connect called GDSs, which kind of are MLSs, but they really only are like 2 or 3 GDSs instead of 600 MLSs. And so you could get the 15 people in the room that basically are the travel industry, which is travel industry is about the same size as the real estate industry. You could get those 15 people in the room like in a day, and they get in the room together all the time. Real estate is totally different. You've got literally millions of people that are together make up this industry. And so, of course, it's not because this industry is full of Luddites that we've had slowish adoption for real estate, for technology. It's just that the industry is so fragmented. Anyway, to answer your question, what should agents do to future-proof their business? Have digital solutions to all aspects of your business. For lead generation, you're going to want to have a great website that's SEO optimized. You're going to want to have social media that's connected to that website that generates organic audience, or blogging or other forms of organic traffic acquisition. You're going to want to supplement that with some forms of paid lead generation, whether it's SEM, either that you buy directly or through a third-party tech partner. You're probably going to also want some lead generation from Zillow or CoStar/Homes.com or Realtor.com or all three. You're also going to want other point tech solutions. Sometimes they'll be provided by an integrated tech provider, like a CRM, for example. So you need some way to track your customers. You're also going to want, on top of that CRM, something to provide insights into what is happening in that CRM. And those insights, ideally, are going to be powered by AI, and ideally, they're going to be doing parts of your job for you so that you look like a superhero because you're busy doing other stuff, but this AI is out there dropping lines in the water, pinging past customers, pinging current customers, making them seem like you're thinking about them all the time. And then I guess there's another sort of layer below that, which let's call it like the infrastructure layer, where you're going to need Dotloop or DocuSign, you're going to need Dropbox, you're going to need a good photo partner and an MLS, obviously, tech partner, maybe a podcast tech partner, like kind of another, maybe even you might just use Gmail or Zillow or Outlook, but some, it sounds basic, but like an email provider of some sort. So there's like an infrastructure layer which sits below that, which is obvious table stakes. And then this like AI layer that sits above it.
Yeah. It sounds like you're describing the AI layer almost like an assistant that can take admin tasks, that can take redundant work. How should people think about this? Fast forward 3 years. What's the extent of tasks that you think this type of AI will be able to accomplish?
The good news is I'm pretty bearish on the AI replacing the agent. And I'm very bullish on the AI supplementing the agent and making the agent look like a hero. But to answer your question, the types of things that I think the AI will do is appointment setting, lead follow-up, lead qualification / lead scrubbing, lead incubation, following up with past customers, transcribing and updating CRMs after client calls, perhaps coordinating with other people in the transaction, like a mortgage lender or a title or appraisal partner or photographer. Yep. Really anything that an inside sales associate or an admin does today and more will be offered by some AI solution. Should allow agents to be much more productive. And an agent today who feels like they're always underwater to do a deal a week should someday be able to be doing, at the extreme, perhaps a deal a day, which today would be like, oh my God, that's impossible. My hair would be on fire all the time. And it's maybe, but if you think of I'm trying to think of other industries where there have been step changes in technology that have radically improved their efficiency, maybe even within real estate. Like if you just think about what email did for real estate. So my mom was a realtor in New York in the 80s, and there was no voicemail, there were no cell phones, and there was no email. So I've never actually asked her. She was a top producer. I don't know how many deals she did a month, a year, probably like 3. Because back then, just think about what must life have been like as a real estate agent with no email and no phone, like no cell phone. So all of a sudden, these newfangled technologies came online, and your productivity radically increased because now you had a cell phone and email. So it could be that big a step change in productivity if AI is implemented really successfully throughout the whole workflow of a real estate agent and team.
Yeah, it's so exciting. I agree. I think it'll truly give people superpowers to do their job more effectively, to unlock new creativity. I'm also less worried about humans getting replaced, and I see the opportunities and really unlocking human potential in a really exciting way. You mentioned Zillow and CoStar, and of course you built Zillow into the most dominant company in the residential real estate sector. Now CoStar is making a push into the residential side with the acquisitions of Homes.com and more recently Matterport. How do you see this battle between Zillow and CoStar playing out over the next few years?
I've been gone from Zillow for 5 years, just to get that out of the way. And I'm still a shareholder, but not on the board and not involved in Zillow anymore. Zillow is a beloved brand, and I don't see its traffic position being challenged. I've been saying for the last 3 years that CoStar is a very serious competitor they're going to pour tens of millions, eventually hundreds of millions of dollars into homes.com for consumer marketing. And it will become the second most visited real estate site. And it has, by some measures, the third most visited by other measures. But most of that traffic has not come at the expense of Zillow. It's come at the expense of brokerage websites and Realtor.com and Redfin and a long tail of other competitors. And I think that will continue. So I don't worry about Zillow's competitive positioning at the top of the food chain in terms of consumer audience. I think the monetization, Zillow and Homes.com have very different business models, at least for now. Zillow's business model is a buy-side lead generation model where the leads are basically auctioned to the highest bidder in the zip code. And Homes.com basically has a sell-side model where they charge listing agents for stored order and listing merchandising and listing prominence. And they haven't really run up against each other that much yet in terms of wallet share of advertisers. They will. Zillow is building a business on the sell side, Listing Showcase, which by all accounts seems to be selling really well, which does compete with Homes.com's model. And I believe that eventually Homes.com will reach saturation on its business model and come after Zillow on the buy side lead generation. Those of us on the sidelines with popcorn, it'll be interesting to watch. But I like Zillow's chances. Obviously, I still bleed blue. But to date, even though I guess I'd say maybe it's one's in the NFC and one's in the AFC. And like they've each become dominant, to use a football metaphor here, in their own conference, but there's no Super Bowl yet. So they don't really compete with each other just yet, even though the media wants to talk about them competing with each other.
What about the future of the brokerage? There have been some notable new entrants. There are now virtual models and tech-enabled brokerages and low commission models. Which model do you think has the best chance of success looking ahead?
It depends where and what. I think there is going to continue to be a place in certain markets where the brokerage brand is important enough that they can charge agents a premium split. So here in Los Angeles, I think the agency is a brand that matters and means something. In Seattle, where I used to live, Windermere, John L. Scott, Coldwell Banker Bain are three brands that mean something. That if you're an agent and you're trying to decide, do I go to EXP or Avenue 8 or Radius Agent or even Keller Williams, where I'll keep almost all of my commission, or do I go to Windermere? You're going to be incentivized and need to strongly consider going to Windermere and giving up a lot more of your commission to work at that firm. The brokerages that I think are in a really difficult competitive position are those whose value proposition to agents and brand to consumers are not strong enough to command that premium that they're charging brokerages to affiliate with them. And I'm an investor in a couple startups, Avenue 8 and Radius Agent, that are both disruptive commission models that are trying to capitalize on that and provide agents with some services at a very low price. And I think there's a really, let's say what Keller Williams was in the 60s, or I guess what RE/MAX was in the 60s and 70s, Keller Williams was in the 80s and 90s, EXP was in the 2000s, 2010s. I think there's a place for these companies, for Avenue 8 and Radius Agents and perhaps others. But if you're listening to this and you run a brokerage that dominates your market and has a really strong value prop, I think you're much safer than others.
Yeah, I think that's right and really insightful. I definitely think brand will matter more going forward. If buyers are more thoughtful about who they work with, that benefits anyone who can communicate their value prop and who has a strong brand. Right? Mm-hmm. That's something that I see playing out as well. What's an opinion you have about the real estate industry that most people would disagree with?
That's a good question. Probably that commissions are going to be pretty sticky. I think most people, certainly people outside the industry, are misreading this NAR thing, and they're just seeing headlines, and the media is reporting it completely incorrectly, saying, "Oh, commissions are getting slashed because the government has lowered commissions." Like, people keep telling me that. So I guess that's one thing I would say I disagree with the mainstream on. Another related to that, I continue to be amazed by how many startups seek to disrupt the role of the real estate agent. And every time I speak at a business school or at college, or I feel like almost once a week, I'm pitched by some founder who's, oh, the internet has put travel agents out of business. The internet has put stockbrokers out of business. The internet's going to put real estate agents out of business. And I'm like, look, young whippersnapper, like maybe I thought that 20 years ago for 5 seconds, but that didn't last very long. And instead I built Zillow into a big business predicated on the role of the agent persisting. Again, actually, people always misunderstand that. A lot of people are like, oh, Spencer, you did such a great job disrupting the real estate industry. I'm like, I don't actually think we disrupted very much at all. I think maybe if you want to say we disrupted anything, you'd say it was the newspapers. We disrupted paid classifieds, but we didn't actually disrupt much of anything about the real estate industry. We disrupted the way that real estate agents advertise, but we didn't actually disrupt much else. So anyway, that's something that I continue to disagree with most outsiders about, is the level of disruption that has occurred and that will occur in the industry.
Who are 5 industry leaders you would put on your real estate Mount Rushmore?
Oh, that's a good question. I can't think about that. In mind right away, as soon as you just said industry leaders. Tom Ferry, I think Tom is an incredible coach, is such a great public speaker, is always 5 steps ahead. His instincts are spot on. I just think he's awesome. I have the utmost respect for Tom. Bob Hale, who runs Houston Association of Realtors, is another one that I'd say just an early adopter of technologies, an incredible gentleman and just kind person. And he deserves to be there. Glenn Kelman, for the following reason, which is the conversation we were having earlier about founders struggling. And like Glenn has persisted like through ups and downs and challenges, big and small. Redfin has built an incredible website and brand. And Glenn has been at the top of that company for 20 years and never misses a day of work and works really hard for his company's mission. Let's see. Rob Hahn is a very controversial guy. He's not everyone's favorite cup of tea because he's very brash and opinionated. But if you can put aside the presentation layer, as we say in software development, and just focus on his insights, he is right 99% of the time, maybe 99.99% of the time. So Rob definitely deserves to be on industry around Mount Rushmore.
Yeah. He's incredibly insightful, and these are some amazing leaders. My last question for you, what's something you are excited about? Any upcoming projects or launches?
Yeah, I'm super excited about where Q is going. Q now has 2 million downloads. We're about to launch a paid tier, which will help you manage your bundle. So people's bundle of streaming services has become overblown. It's a couple $100s for a lot of people. And not only does Q help you figure out what to watch, but very shortly it will figure out how to do it for less money. And so I think that's a great product direction for Q. And I'm really excited about that. And then it's impossible to answer any question about the future without at least giving a nod to AI. Almost every day, some new AI innovation pops inbox, whether it's new use of voice or the ability to create auto-generated video or the ability to read emotions of clients or people on the other end of the screen. These are scary, exciting, disruptive technologies that are going to impact really everything about how we interact with brands, and customer and companies and service providers in every industry, not just real estate.
Yeah, well said. Thank you so much for being on, Spencer. It was truly an honor. I learned a lot. So appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me.
And that's a wrap on today's episode of the Presence Podcast. A huge thank you to Spencer Rascoff for joining us and sharing such valuable insights into the intersection of real estate and technology. Spencer, your experience and forward-thinking perspectives have undoubtedly shed light on the evolving role of real estate agents in our tech-driven world. To our listeners, we hope you found this conversation as enlightening and inspiring as I did. The world of real estate is changing rapidly, and it's clear that technology will continue to play a pivotal role in shaping its future. Remember to follow or subscribe to the Presence Podcast on your favorite podcast platforms to stay updated on the latest episodes. We have some awesome guests planned in the coming weeks and months, So thank you for tuning in. Join us next time for more insightful conversations on the Presence Podcast. Until then, stay informed, stay curious, and we'll see you on the next one. Goodbye for now.